We're talking about like my hip hop poster. He lives in Brooklyn.
I mean, Greg is a New York boy, so like just sort of. I'm pretty sure you have a bunch of Ben. You're in New York as well, right?
I'm in New York. I might be posing as a New York boy. I moved up here in September. I'm actually from the South.
Oh, yeah. Where are you from in the South?
Yeah, I'm from Charleston, South Carolina.
Oh, nice.
That's where I was born and raised.
Nice. Beautiful place.
Well, I'm in California, so like, and Greg's in Pacific Northwest, so we have all the corners covered except for Florida, but I don't consider that as a corner of the United States. So it's not even a corner.
I just want to say this. Like, I do have a hard stop at 3, but like this thing is set up to record, so I can leave. And if you guys are having an awesome conversation and you want to keep going, you're welcome to. But I just want to let you guys know that I do have to pause at 3.
Okay, sounds good.
And I don't know how you want to kick this off, Imran. I know you sent over a bunch of materials. I think there's some questions as well. So go for it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can run with yours because it was on the calendar invite. I think just the way of intro, like we, I don't know how much context you shared with Ben, but we are doing this with people who are doing really cool stuff with GTM. Like me and Zach kind of go a little bit back in the sense that Zach actually invested in Syft, or I think he has an angel investment check. And you just, I think, signed up for a trial last month as well. So like we're gonna kind of figure it out, like how do we make. Zach wanted to try out like some agentic stuff with Syft, so we're still very early in there. But like the purpose of this one is like I saw your post about how you are kind of Zach's post about build versus buy was actually very interesting. And then you are like and I really like how he thinks about it in general with Oz that the platform that you are building, which is pretty amazing. So I was like, yeah, maybe let's just go and like we want to talk with people who are like using agents in their own companies and like doing it in a way that's kind of unique. So I just asked him and I was like, yeah, Ben, and your name shows up, like you are the public face right now of like Warp doing a lot of kind of cool agentic stuff. So great to have you on here. And like it's fairly casual. So like I think we can kick it off with Greg, but that's the context.
Awesome. So the way I want to do this is because it'd be helpful for me too. I just want to hear like the quick overview of like who you are, Ben, and then lab that up into helping us understand at a high level Warp, and that way you kind of kick off the conversation and have context for people listening to this later on.
Sounds good. Yeah. So as you mentioned, I'm Ben, developer relations lead at Warp. Bit of background on myself. I've been in the web development world for a number of years. Goes all the way back to high school for me, actually. Been working on like full stack applications, like React, TypeScript, fundamental backend languages, all those things. More recently, before Warp, I was actually working in the open source arena at Astro, which is a open source framework for building content-driven sites. So like documentation and other things. I see you're nodding. You must have.
No, I saw your tweets about Astro and like how you are like, moving your documentation to Astro. And we use Docusaurus for our own website.
Sure, yeah.
And our website is also not hosted on a CMS. It's actually checked into a Git repository. And I was just like, and so that brought back. So anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I love that. Because there was a time that managing all of your documentation with Git and Markdown felt kind of like a esoteric way of doing things. It wasn't super accessible. And now it's become like the best way to do it because it's agent accessible. So if you don't know how to write code, you can easily have an agent work through all of the Git workflows and things. And all you have to worry about is content. And then you get a preview URL on the other side.
Yeah, you could just go. I mean, I did this one day, which is I just went and just pointed the agent to like the Git repository and said like, just do an audit for AEO, SEO and just fix everything for me, please. And since everything is a file, it just goes and does like, the site was AEO optimized in like, half an hour.
Yeah, amazing. We've got skill templates for that just because it's so useful. It's actually one of the first ones we built with the SEO audit skill. And then another one that was an accessibility audit, which are like two of the biggest problems I ever ran into in web development was making sure accessibility is right and making sure the docs are right. And it kind of handles both of those in one go.
Awesome.
Awesome. Just give me the high level of Warp. And I think what's important maybe is just like, tell us what's different from some of the other tools out there. Like obviously people listening to this are going to be pretty familiar with these things, but I thought that would just be helpful to kind of set the context.
Yeah, totally. And I guess that kind of lands plane on like my background. So I joined Warp about a year ago.
Oh yeah.
And I joined as a product engineer, and at Warp, pretty much everyone is a product engineer because it's an engineering focused tool. It's mostly engineers with designers and others on staff. But yeah, I joined Warp because I'd used it for a number of years and had actually done a bit of like content about the terminal on the side. That's kind of how I had an intro. And I was using it just as a really nice to use terminal. And that's still like, if you search for Warp or you're wondering what Warp is, that's kind of the starting point. Is it's a really nice to use terminal. Like normally if you spin up your integrated Mac OS terminal or you install something a little nicer like iTerm, you're still kind of dropped into like your root directory with not much direction on what to do or where to go. And simple things don't really work the way you expect. Like you need to, if you want to use your mouse cursor to move around, you can't do that. All of a sudden you need to use keyboard bindings to simply like move your cursor in the prompt window. If you've been using Claude Code, you probably dealt with this before. Can be annoying. So one of the claims to fame was like, Warp feels a little bit more like a rich text editor where anything you type in, you can move your cursor around, highlight text. Every command you run is its own block that's easy to like both filter down stack traces if you're like a DevOps person, which is a very strong persona for us. But also if you're just trying to like share and work on things with a team that relate to the terminal. So one of the things we added was like a share block feature that lets you take very long sort of stack traces or other things you run into in the terminal and share it as a web link. So if you wanted to like connect with your team while you're trying to debug a problem, you can easily do so. So that's sort of expanded the mentality from usability to helping teams get things done. And then more recently, as soon as I joined start of last year, it was including teams as well as agents. So Warp is like a built-in agent that you can easily talk to just with natural language detection is what we call it. So normally you just run commands in a terminal, like I need to list out what's in this directory. But you can also just start typing a question. Like if you wanted to say, how do I query the YouTube API for this metric or something like that, you could just ask that question and you don't even have to spin up a coding agent or anything like that. It just detects, oh, that looks like a question. That's not a command. So let me send this to Warp's built-in agent to answer that question for you. And it's a multi-model harness. So if you're familiar with things like Copilot or Cursor, it's in that sort of vein, open code as well. The options like bring your own key or flip on like our agent setup where you can just use whatever model you want. And you can ask it questions as simple as helping me with a Git rebase to complex build out entire applications for me, as you may do with other coding agents. But I think the real nicety is like everything is very interactive. It's very clickable. We have coding features built into this terminal now, like having a code review that's built in. So as soon as the agent's done working, you like slide out the code review. You can see all the changes that were made. You can leave comments on that code review and send it to the agent as well. So we sort of spidered up from it's a nice terminal to now we're kind of this whole development environment that has everything from coding to helping you use agents to helping you work with teams, just all of the needs that emerge when people start stretching a tool more and more. So that's really where Warp is today. It's just a super capable tool of getting things done, especially as an engineer.
Wow. Ben, you are really good. I didn't even think I needed this. And after hearing that, I want to go install it
Amazing.
right away. Like that was a fantastic. You should go into this like dev relations area. I think it'd be a really good fit for you. I think it might do really well in that. Anyway, okay. No more jokes. No more dad jokes. What I want to do is like pivot the conversation because you started talking about AI agents and AI and how to incorporate that into what you're doing. And so let's start with like talking about agents. And the first question that I had, I think the way to kind of orient this discussion for today is just talking about in more of a general way, how do you envision agents perhaps changing, replacing, positioning the way people handle their SaaS stack? And I even like put it more broadly, like we could talk about GTM, but I think it applies across the spectrum of like SaaS products. So give me your perspective on like where you think that's all headed. How do you think AI agents are gonna are going to change, and maybe I don't want to guarantee that it eliminate at least some aspects of SaaS. Like, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think, and I think they had a post about build versus buy, right? I think, or maybe Zach wrote one. And so, yeah, I guess a more specific version of this question from me would be that, like, okay, so if you were a buyer of SaaS, and I guess you guys famously like just don't, like, you're like, yeah, we're not buying traditional SaaS anymore. We're like, building agents actually. So how does that build versus buy kind of framework look like for you as a buyer of software? Now, obviously, you also sell the orchestration platform as well to us, but just as a buyer, like, what's the calculus there for you?
Yeah. And it's probably worth like pulling out some concrete examples of what we have been doing and sort of talking about like where we found success in that and where we're starting to draw lines. Because we're a few months into this, which is probably like 5 AI years. So it's a long time. But I think like the early success that we found is, okay, we already have these existing SaaS tools that we're using to aggregate data and other things. So like for customer data, we use BigQuery to aggregate everything. For recruiting, we use Greenhouse and we pull in recruiting information that way. And the answer wasn't right away, okay, let's throw away all of these and build a backend to source all of our recruiting and all of our customer telemetry. We started from like getting insights on the front end side. So like, okay, Greenhouse is storing all of this information, but there's certain information that we want to track, or we want to track it more seamlessly than what the Greenhouse UI is giving us. So we're going to keep storing everything there, but let's see if we can use an API or a CLI or any other mode of data access to start building something a bit more custom to what our team's trying to do. And that was like the first example internally of, and this wasn't prompted in any way. There was no mandate of start experimenting. We had a member of our recruiter team, Mac, who just started in his free time building an entire sort of battle station with a Kanban board that tracks applicants all the way through the process, like from initial call to screening interview to final round and all of that. And he preferred to see it in like this nice Kanban that he could drag around with statuses that are color coded so we can easily get an overview of everything that's going on. And he just asked the Warp agent, build me a UI that does this. Here's my Greenhouse API token. Go crazy. Like, let's build this UI together. He has no coding experience. He just knew what he wanted enough, roughly. And it started as just like, it's a dashboard that's on his computer, not even with authentication or set up on a public URL. It's just kind of a tool that he spun up to do this stuff a bit more quickly. And over time, it turned into like an authenticated page so that other members of the recruiting team could access it and use it. But it really started from that simple need of, we use these SaaSes, but we could use them to build something much more custom to our internal workflow. So let's start doing that. And that's been happening more and more with other tools. Like I mentioned, BigQuery is like a way to source information. Before, if you ever wanted to get summaries of like what our week over week usage metrics were, or how many Windows bugs have been reported and are they trending upward, we would share those out in a weekly stand-up. We would have a data team that gets all of the metrics into some viewable graphs and tables and then presents them. And maybe sometimes we need to like edit a graph, and so we need to tell the data team what to do, and then the next week stand-up will see those changes, or maybe async in a Slack thread. But there's all sorts of questions that you don't want to reach out to the data team for. Or maybe there's a question you have that's not in that weekly stand-up, but you still want to know the answer. So we thought, okay, we have this data warehouse. Again, we got the back end. Can we just make a set of skills that we put into a shared repo that help our team just ask questions, and then help the agent hold all of the query languages in order to actually get those insights? And so that's what he did. The head of our data team, he built a skill or a set of skills that include like all of the queries and literally example.sql files of how to use our backend. And then you could just ask questions. Like, why are we seeing this upward trend in Windows usage? Is there something wrong in our data view, and how do we fix it? Like, you can ask these questions, and you can get back answers without having to directly go to the data team. And when you do go to the data team about things, you're much more equipped with, like, I actually asked the agent about what we were seeing. Here are some trends I noticed. Can you add this to our stand-up with the graphs and all of that stuff?
And people are querying this using ChatGPT or Claude, or like, what's the interface, Slack? Like, what, or you have your own?
That was my question too.
Yeah. Well, of course, we're biased towards using the Warp agent for all this stuff. So at least for those kinds of questions, we're all happy opening like the Warp terminal, going into that directory, because we have a project picker in the Warp terminal too. You can just like pick the project, ask your question, and that's kind of it. You don't really have to run any fancy commands. So it's accessible to engineering and non-engineering people. Like, we haven't felt the need to like move this somewhere more friendly, like a desktop app or Slack. So we're happy just keeping it there. But there are like touch points that we have inside of Slack and other places as well, that I can definitely speak to, because it's useful sometimes if you're having a conversation with someone in Slack, you want to tag in an agent to like get a quick answer and just have it in the thread. So no one had to open their terminal and paste an output or something like that. So there's definitely value in having it in those places as well, as just a way to collapse the context. No more complicated.
Is there a good example of a Slack agent that you're deploying?
Yeah, I mean, it started with just like the simple Slack coding agent, and that's bundled into like the cloud orchestration platform that you alluded to a little bit. Obviously, we were like the first internal users, and the first thing we built was just a generic, here's a Slack bot. It spins up a environment in the cloud. That environment has our code base in it.
Right.
And with that, we can ask questions as engineers about, while we're trying to work out a plan or t-shirt size a bug fix. And we can also give it access to the GitHub CLI if we want to. Okay. So we could ask it, just make a quick fix and send us a preview URL or something.
Right.
Or give us the session for us to resume it on our machine if we actually want to take it somewhere. So it started with like, we want our Slack agent to be a coding agent. Like, that was the first use case that we had. So it was like an engineer first use case, so that if we're discussing a bug and we're wondering what the scope of it will be, the quickest answer is just ask an agent to go build it and see how good the solution is. You kind of remove the friction of like, how hard is this going to be? And then you can get more into, okay, what does the feature look like?
So going back to the build versus buy question, or like, you know, like it seems like your first thing was you already had some software or some systems of record, right? Whether it's Greenhouse or BigQuery. And so your first approach, or like, you know, the first agents that you build out were like more like extensions of those things, where the data kind of became a little bit more actionable with better front ends. Essentially, is that the first category of things? That's where you started, and now where would you think is like the most, what we call agentic sort of deployment? Because those are cool, because like those, like, you know, those kind of, as you said, like you extend the platforms because they weren't built for the way you work. What are some of the examples where things are a little bit more autonomous, let's just say?
Like going further than just building on top of an existing like SaaS backend or something like that?
Yeah, and I think it's just also like it felt like you the tools that you built were like very much like still like humans were like, you know, involved in terms of like, you know, like actioning on that data. Whereas like, you know, with agentic capabilities, with the goal always is like how much autonomy that you can give to these things, and they kind of go on their own and do stuff. So what has been that like arc for you? Like, you know, where would you say like, you know, is most of your work now towards the autonomous part, or like, you know, it's mixed between these two kind of different ways of building AI software?
Yeah, I mean, it's totally a mix. And autonomy, like agents spinning up on a schedule or agents spinning up on triggers that aren't a human, that's becoming more and more part of the stack for sure. And I can speak to an example on the developer experience side where this has been working out, where I would say we're going deeper than the examples I was saying before of let's replace the front end part. It's like, okay, can we push the agent a little bit further down So like, can we push the agent from not just the front end, but also like data inference, or maybe replacing the entire back end? They're replacing the entire back end. There's really only one example, which is migrating our doc site to Markdown, at least so far. That's like how far we've gone with that one. But on the inference side and the automation side, at least on like the developer experience team, we've been using agents pretty rigorously to get insights from our community, to know, first off, like what people are talking about with Warp, getting involved in those conversations to show we're like a member of the community, staying on top of threads that we may not have found otherwise. But also helping us like easily pull out features that people are requesting, commonalities, all those sorts of things. So when we first started, we had sort of a fire hose channel in our Slack called Social Mentions. And this was like the fire hose that every relations team ends up with, where it's like every channel from every platform ever, just shooting it all into the void. Like if anyone finds time to look at these, great. And we said, okay, so that's not working super well, because we can sort of take a glass and hold it up to this waterfall, but I just don't have enough time in the day. So we, and we're a team of 3, by the way. We've spun this thing up pretty quickly. And we said, okay, to get on top of this, first we need like a fire hose that filters on key terms. So there is like a SaaS element of this that's just hooking up all the API keys and giving us that fire hose again, slightly filtered down. But then from here, it's like, okay, we see all these messages across X and Blue Sky and LinkedIn and Reddit and all these forums. Can we do something simple, like have the agent suggest if it's worth engaging with? Because a lot of the time it's like a listicle, or it's a AI generated post that includes Warp in passing. There's these things that I just don't need to spend cycles looking at it. I would like to easily filter down to things that are actually actionable. Yeah. So we took a agent and we gave it a Slack trigger. So anytime something comes in from this fire hose, and I think we do it in batches, so that's a little bit more manageable. We spin up one of these cloud agents that I alluded to earlier. It has a set of skills so that it knows how we like engage with the community, what high value means to us, and we refine that skill over time. Can also talk about self-improvement, which is another aspect of that. But we look at that Slack thread in batches. We have the agent connect out. It has secrets, so it also has access to Slack. So it can pull in that batch. It can look at it. And based on those skills, it can decide, okay, is this skippable, something we should like, or something that we should reply to? And if it's something we should reply to, give us an initial draft, just so we can play with something. And we set up that agent. It sends like a threaded reply on each of those fire hose mentions. So now anytime we go through, and each of us has their own batch, like I go through it in the evenings. Petra, who's in European time zone, can look at it in the mornings. Just go through there, look at all the suggestions, skip, find the thing to reply to, and then just post the draft, whatever that is. So that's really been helpful for us, because now it means we don't just have this crazy fire hose. We have something filtered by key terms that actually tells us how to make this actionable. And then we're starting to stretch this thing further and further from there, but I'll pause.
So let me like reiterate or summarize what I think I heard. So you're doing what I would call social listening. So you've got this fire hose of all this data that's basically across like social media sites. And then you're able to have an agent run on that in batches or whatever. And it looks at that and identifies signals. And then it tries to figure out which ones are valuable based on, like, let's call it a criteria that you have given it. And then when it finds things that meet your criteria that you think are valuable, it suggests a way to engage. And then you go and actually do the engagement. The agent doesn't do the engagement on your behalf. It just suggests, like, go to this Reddit thread here and we think you might want to post this.
Yeah. And I think that last mile is an important one, because that's where, like, that, I hate the word taste, but yeah, that's kind of what it is. As members of developer experience, like, we know we have a lot more context than we've given this agent, at least thus far, on like, we know what our roadmap's going to be for the next month. We know, like, this Windows issue matches another Windows issue that our engineers working on in this Slack thread, and that isn't tied all the way into the agent for context. And so partially the reason we have that last step of we're not going to let the agent reply, we're going to do the reply ourselves, is like the and everything I listed, like I would love for these to be solved problems, but at least how it exists today with how we've set this thing up, like we still have a lot more context than what we've been able to drill into this agent so far. Like the most we've been able to give it is like the full thread. So that was an improvement we made recently. It's not just like the individual reply from the fire hose, like give it the full thread, have it reach out to X so that it has everything. If it's on Twitter, for example, so at least has that. We do have it create weekly summaries that it pulls into a references folder. So it remembers last week, these things came up from users. So it has some context on prior things. But all this really deep sort of tribal knowledge of this engineer is working on this thing. He hasn't tracked it in this place yet. Like that's still something that we have to think about as developer experience people. And so when we look at their generated replies, we give feedback to the agent. Like we actually gave this reply. This was the draft that you did. Here's, if we have time to give it, like here's some reasons that we decided to reply in this way. And sometimes it's just voice. Other times it's, we knew about this particular Windows issue being fixed in the next day and you didn't. And so that's the reason that we put it in here. And then that's actually kind of segues me into like self-improvement, which is like the last thing we're trying to play with. Yeah. We're like, yeah, once we do that last mile, we do the reply. We give it some notes on what we actually did. We have the agent once a day look through any of those replies that we sent to it and try to PR a change to its own internal skills. If it thinks, I actually want to add something to my skill to do better next time, it will actually do so. And we even have a meta skill in there about how the agent should learn from our feedback. It gets really crazy. I will point to Petra for creating that one because she's been in product management for a long time. And the whole thing just reads like a product manager telling you how to take feedback well, pretty much. Like here's how you should think through things. It's not just like this log of examples that we throw at it, which I've seen some people do. Like every time we give a counterexample, log the counterexample. It needs to be a little higher level than that. It needs to be a little bit more like, here's how you listen to feedback. Here's how you drill into the what and why. All of these sort of meta thoughts that we want the agent to have when it's looking at our feedback is like included.
I was going to say, I just want to ask a quick question, which is like, or maybe take us into different. Originally, we were talking about like the stack and like how you guys are adjusting stack. And what I've heard so far is like you're taking the data and then doing new things with it, right? So maybe I want to reframe the original question and ask you like, where are the productivity gains or where is the efficiency? Like, how is these things making you guys better, more efficient, like a better company, right? That maybe that's a better way to frame it rather than like, what tools are you eliminating, right? I feel like there's like a lot of people kind of circling around that. And it sounds like you're doing all these really interesting things internally and you're building all these really cool tools, agents, whatever. So maybe the appropriate way for you guys to like share with me and share with other people is like talk about like, where's the efficiency gain coming from? Or do you think you're getting efficiency gains? I'm curious to hear.
Yeah, I actually have a maybe a sort of a follow-up or like a more specific version of that question, which is like you give that example of social listening, right? And so like usually like there is what we see with AI is that there are things that you were doing before, but you can do faster now. And then there are things that you wouldn't even be able to do before, right? Yeah. And now it's possible to do them. Like the social listening kind of feels in that like, okay, that was like a fire hose of stuff. Kind of went there, like, if we got to it, maybe we got to it, but we weren't even able to like, just process it. And so for me, it's like, I always, at least internally here at Syft, we kind of think I was like, okay, well, is it, what we can't do today, we can now do, and what we can do today, how can we do faster? Is there some sort of a rubric like that for you at Warp? Like, how do you, to Greg's point, like, how do we categorize productivity gains, I guess?
How do you categorize productivity gains? Because sometimes it's more tangible, and sometimes it's like, I think this made us 10% faster. I won't know for sure, but I think it did. that the former, like, I think it's easiest when you can point to things like this was not part of our process, and now that we automated some parts, it is. Like, going through the fire hose was not part of our process, but now that someone is telling us what to skip and what to reply to, it is. We could have tried to build a system of everyone look at the fire hose religiously, and maybe it would have worked, but I suspect there would have been a lot more sort of burnout, or a lot of people getting really clever and trying to like highlight stuff out of Slack, paste it into an agent, and ask it to summarize. Like a more manual version of what we did would probably end up happening if we did something like that. And I've always felt this way about automations, where it's like maybe the amount of time it took you to build the automation plus the efficiency gains doesn't equal total time saved. Like sometimes it might have taken you 2 hours to make an automation to save 2 minutes per day over X amount of months. And people say, why'd you spend the 2 hours if you amortize it this way? It's like, no, it's the context switching. Like now I'm not spending 2 minutes a day context switching to this thing. I'm able to focus on one thing and automated this other part. So that 2 hours was so I didn't have to context switch for the rest of the year, because context switching has its own costs that no one really talks about.
That's a great point, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah. I know. I agree. I think it's a good way to think about it, because there is like costs with trying to like get in the right mindset and try to understand what you're doing, or the understanding sometimes for me could be a lot of effort. Like I know when I switch between tasks, teams, whatever, it's like I have to like think really deeply about the context that I'm in now. And sometimes that can just be like a lot of overhead. I got a long day, so I got home and I was like, I'm just fried, right? Because just like going to do so many different things, and like you gotta have a lot of knowledge to show up to the meeting and be effective, right? So yeah, everyone's like, oh my God, I know exactly what you're talking about, right? So I think it makes a lot of sense. You brought up taste too. I feel like we should touch on it, because I have the same sense as you, that like, I guess I'll even call it out. Like I feel like it's the trendy word of the day. And I'm always think it's a bit ironic to hear from people who I don't necessarily think are the most fantastic examples of great taste, which is for me always quite ironic and funny. But I do think that like it does play a role in the world today when AI is, let's say, eliminating or reducing some of the craft aspects of how people do a number of different tasks. So yeah, you brought it up, and I'm curious, like, what does that mean for you? And I have a more specific version of this question, but I want to leave it really open-ended and hear what you think about it in general.
Yeah, I mean, because I'm coming at it as an engineer, because that's been my arena and still is. And I feel like it hit the engineering people the hardest, of like the robot looking at itself, what is my purpose? Like that sort of moment. I feel like it's easier to answer in the worlds of like product design and finding things that you should focus in on, or in system design, finding like the way that you should scale up, or ask the question, should we like adopt this new, I don't know, Postgres database if we're fine using Firebase, or, you know, those architecture questions that you used to ask. I feel like taste in like the syntax of code is the thing that engineers really get hung up on, as like, well, this was kind of my jam, is like I get my flow state in figuring out systems and syntax and all of these other problems. And that's the part that might be something that you could codify into a skill and you don't really need to be heavily involved in anymore. And that's tough, because to me, it feels like taste is kind of moving up the stack. Like I myself am more of a front-end focused engineer. I gravitate towards things that have either a visual or an API design component. I feel like UI design and API design are both a similar way of thinking. And so for me, like we're going into developer experience and getting an eye for what features are really worth drilling into has been really rewarding, because most of the work is figuring out what to do and how it should work based on aggregating all of this feedback. And the implementation just needs to follow a skill guide and have a code review step at the other end. Like that part is mostly solved. It's the deciding what to build and how to take a lot of a lot of different data points on what to do and turning it into like one solution that solves as many of those problems as possible. Like that's the root of what design is. And I feel like that is where most of the taste lives now. It's not so much in the implementation detail of how are you structuring your React components? What are your abstractions? How are you doing these sorts of things? Like that stuff isn't as important as the high level system architecture, which is one layer of design, and the feature design, which is like another layer of it. I personally gravitate towards the second half. I know other engineers will gravitate toward the system design half and don't really gravitate toward the customer side. They're both very important. But I do feel for the engineers who kind of feel stranded in the middle of like, they don't really want to go into these design spaces. They're happy solving the like syntax puzzles and getting everything that way because it's very fulfilling. It's like a very fun aspect of engineering that I still kind of miss working on. Like I worked on like a CSS problem by hand this weekend just to touch grass, basically. I was like, I just want to solve this one problem. And it's kind of like doing a Sudoku puzzle and figuring it out. Like, here's how all the pieces should fit together instead of jumping to the solution. So I do feel like that aspect of sort of, I don't know, flow state has been lost in engineering. But if you're wondering like where the value and the taste are, it's moving up towards the design level thinking and deciding what to focus on and what to care about.
Yeah. That's great. A great answer. I agree. I have one more question, and then Imran, I know you have a million questions, but I want to ask, do you think that like these tools and agents and vibe coding and all this automation, is it going to reduce bloat? Is it going to reduce everyone's SaaS stack, GTM stack? Or is it going to open up new doors and create more complexity? And you guys sound like really close to it. Like you've been building your own things, doing a lot of interesting stuff. I'm curious if you have a perspective on this, because I think there are like really two camps out there with like strong opinions on either side of this.
Yeah. Would you say those two camps are like, there's going to be the one meta app that kind of overtakes everything, and the other is there will be so much software?
Yeah, there's kind of like reductionists. There's people who are like, everything's going to collapse into one thing. It's going to be like consumer electronics is collapsed into the phone, right? Those types of like thinking. Then there's other people who are like, maximizers, perhaps is maybe the term I would use. Like, no, everything's going to become available to everyone. Nurses are going to be coding their own tools. Everyone's going to have their own, like you described, individual interface for their life, designed the way that they want it, right? Like software for all, right? And I think they're really extreme ideas actually on this spectrum. And so I'm curious, like, you guys have been doing a lot of these things. You gave this really cool example, in fact, of like someone that's got, hey, I'm not happy with Greenhouse or whatever. I'm going to do my own Kanban thing because that's just better for me. And that's just what he's doing, right? So there's already, my opinion, there's already an example of you guys doing the like maximizational approach where everyone gets their own software, gets their own approach, gets their own personalization. So I'm just curious, like, your thoughts on this.
Yeah. And I know we were pointing earlier to some of like the more sort of high level stuff Zach Lloyd's been talking about, but there was one post they did recently that really echoes this, like talking about meta apps as a term, like the app that builds the apps as becoming a lot more important than like app marketplaces themselves. I feel like there's multiple sides to this. I'm more nuanced. I feel like he's more bullish on like everyone's going to build their own stuff. I don't know if that's exactly how he might put it, but yeah, I do think there's going to be a lot more value captured in like the people who build like the data layer and the primitives to make this stuff work. Like every early success story we had was like, we want to build an interface, but we don't want to manage the data layer. That part's fine. We really just want not even the last mile, just the way we interface with this data to get the things out that we need to get out. Like there's still value in having platforms for tracking applicants. There's value in having these services that aggregate all the community channels for DevX. There's still value, of course, in like deployment and where we host our code and all of that stuff. So like all the infrastructure that's needed for people to build these apps, there's never been a better time. Like the fact that Supabase, you're whipping up 10 million projects a day is just an indication. Like if you are on more of the data side, because I've heard often like data is the real value of any SaaS. I think that's really true. Because it's the hosting and the authentication and all that stuff that's a bit harder than deciding how you interface with the data. So I feel like there's still like a ton of room in there for the infrastructure, but that might mean there's less diversity of stuff. We may have more generalized solutions now of like, we don't need 50 different SaaS apps that help you manage content, for example. Maybe we just need a primitive of GitHub and some Markdown, or maybe a more tied in primitive like Notion. And then all the other unique SaaS things can just be UIs on top of those other infrastructure companies. Like that may be the flattening that we start seeing.
Yeah, interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, but I mean, the one nuance I throw in is like pretending everyone is suddenly a great designer and wants to be their own designer. I don't totally agree with it. Because, well, some of it is feeling a little defensive of the things that I like, which is like thinking about the design of something for like multiple days or weeks, like working on Warp's planning feature, which is like the interactive document you get to plan out how you're going to work on something. It's like a rich text editor. We thought through how document versioning should work. We thought through what should happen if the agent decides to push an update while you're typing. What happens if you're typing a change while the agent's working? How do you notify it? Like all these really deep design questions, which is really like the last 20% of good product design. It's annoying work to a lot of people, but really rewarding to some. And whenever that's the case, that means there's some economic value to it. Like I do think people should be empowered to like go build their own like solutions and stuff. But for the last mile of refinement to really make something that you love to use, not everyone is going to put in that last mile and really figure out all the edge cases and take the time for it. And you could argue an agent can do all of that. Maybe it can, but at least at the current state of the art, I don't think it does. It certainly doesn't challenge my thinking without a ton of prompting to do so. So I feel like there's some value there. It's going to be weird how it's captured. I don't have a solid answer on it.
So how do you do that? Like, so it's actually a great thing, because what we at Syft, we think is like, okay, well, there's the 80-20 rule, right? Like you can whip out an 80% prototype, and the other 20% over a period of time you need to just iterate and so on. And the 20% is maintenance, the 20% is to make it run like flawlessly, that other people in the company can depend on. So all the agents that you have been building at the company so far at work, what has been their life cycle? Like, let's say, like, you build something in the hackathon, the one that you built for the social listening stuff, the same with like the PQL qualifier, right? All of that. Who maintains those things? How do you make sure that like they kind of, the 20% keeps on happening and improving? What has worked for you? What hasn't worked for you? And I know it's like still like 5 months in, but it's like 5 AI years, so I'm pretty sure it's all evolving. But
we've at least thought about it. We've at least started like working toward. Exactly. No, I totally agree.
Is there like a ninja team that comes in and takes over the thing, or is it just like, like Bob the SDR still has to kind of maintain the thing that he whipped up in an afternoon, but now the whole sales team depends on it?
Yeah, I mean, I won't say that there's a perfect system, but at least where the last 20% has found success is if the people using it were the people who built it. And especially if the people who built it are equipped to like know what that last 20% looks like. So I'm kind of pointing towards like some of the automations engineers built for things like automated just releases. So we have a agent in our Slack now that's just like helping us manage like cherry picking releases, because there's often like last minute preview features or stable features that we need to ship in. So now I have an agent that sort of streamlines and automates that process. And because all the engineers depend on this thing, they're all willing to like go in the skill file and fix things up, go in the cloud environment where it runs and add dependencies if needed. Because it's just so high value, people are more motivated to put in that last 20%. And because these are engineers working on those, like they can just get it.
Right. Engineers are trained to optimize on the last 20% generally. Like it's like, a lot of engineering is that, oh, Greg just dropped off, but we can, by the way, I can continue until 3:30, but I don't know what you're trying to say.
Yeah, that's fine for me.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so the engineers are like usually like they can chip away at the 20%, but like if you're like if you're a person like in a non-engineering thing where like you're a salesperson or a marketing person, you have like MQLs to generate or quotas to hit, like that 20% can be actually quite a bit of time consuming effort, right? So like how do you then how has that worked in the non-engineering context for you?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on what it was. Like if it's just managing like an agent that interfaces with the backend with a set of skills and there isn't really like a front end component or authentication component, then the last 20% more or less happens because like we're an agent forward company. I mean, we're very motivated because we're building the orchestration platform that we are using. So we know, okay, if I spend an extra hour or two, it's in our company culture that's valuable work. I don't have to go justify it to my manager. So that makes it easier to jump in on those things. And also because it's more personalized software, you know exactly what the 20% looks like. So you can just kind of make it happen. As for like building out super featureful front ends as a non-engineer, which is a category for some of our like SaaS replacements, we don't have a great system for it right now. I will say we've had like a few ad hoc, okay, let's get an engineer in here to make sure the authentication story is right so that the rest of the team that they're working with can use this thing. Like the rest of the recruiting team can use this tool that was once used by a single member. Now we want to make it something the multiple members can use securely. That is something that like engineers can hop in ad hoc, but it's not like I should honestly check if we do have like a recurring meeting or something set up. We might in that area right now. But I at least know like it's difficult. It's difficult to pull in people across the aisle to help you with something that's like not part of your team's goals at all. Like if you're on a team that doesn't have engineers staffed, you just have to rope in someone else. And again, that's like sort of making it part of the company culture, making it part of expectations. Like if an engineer gets pulled aside to work on this thing, it's valuable. And if they do it, try to do it in the most like automatable way. Like maybe instead of adding that system, maybe they build a template of like, anytime we build a new app, it's going to use this structure. I know that Guillermo at Vercel, I think he mentioned something about this because of course they maintain Next.js. Like having a Next.js template for these things. I don't know if that's exactly what they do, but I imagine similar to what we're doing, like having a templated system the next time you need to build a full stack UI that uses like the company style guide just so the UIs look good by default, uses whatever authentication host you have, all that stuff. So at least like the foundation that the agent builds on is less rocky.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I think like I used to work at a bigger company, right? And at big companies that are like platform teams that like their whole job is to kind of just give that leverage to organization. They build tools, and I think a fascinating thing with AI is that I think companies at an earlier stage will probably have to invest in those structures that they would have invested later on down the line, right? Like it's just sort of it's a very because as you build more and more internally, it's a superpower because now software works for you in a way that maximizes how you execute as a company. But then that also requires some investment that historically wasn't warranted at an earlier stage.
Yeah, and do y'all have a platform team, by the way, for these like sorts of things?
No, we are pretty small, but like I used to lead platform teams at Snap is where I was talking about, like, these really large companies like at Snap, at Facebook, and Zach used to work at Google, which is famously very good for, like, they have huge platform teams, and they like, their whole job is to make the product teams go faster by building, this platforming solution, and not only just product engineering, but they also have teams that like Amazon has its own internal recruiting tool that somebody built.
Totally.
And like to your greenhouse example, right? Because the issue with those companies has been that like at their scale, those tools don't work. Like Amazon has a very unique hiring system, and so Greenhouse doesn't work for them. So somebody built it years ago, and then like it's just like it's one of the earliest examples I know of, like that it's called like MRT. It's like the name itself is like it was built by a guy called Matt Rounds. So like that's where the name MRT comes in. And
Wow,
I don't know, maybe they have replaced it since then. But when I used to work there, yeah, it was MRT. It was like and so all these large companies have all these tools, and it's actually an advantage for them, right? Because it's something unique about how Amazon hires. But again, they could throw an engineer on the product. It's not always a cost-cutting exercise for them. It's more like an organizational optimization for them, right? It's our secret sauce about how we hire and how quickly we can do these things, so we can invest in it. And I think there is a democratization of that ethos with AI now. Like a smaller team couldn't do it because not everybody had a Matt Rounds in there who could code up a recruiting tool one fine weekend, right? Like, but now people can because of AI. It's just that now we don't know what the 20%. That's why it's so fascinating. It's like, how do we kind of then what are the processes? What are the organizational structures to get the 20% gap covered? So I think we'll kind of I think we'll learn a lot this year as a lot of the software gets written.
I mean, like a main thing that I just wanted to touch on there is like you need some group of people on the other side that are going to maintain this thing, I think is like the obvious takeaway. And it's why starting with just like the interface and leaving all of the backend and infrastructure to one of the existing hosted solutions is a way to get started with this stuff. So you don't need to sort of hand it off to anyone, because most of like the difficult parts or the security vulnerability, you know what I mean? The parts that would require an engineer's input are less of a concern. And you're really just trying to increase velocity of getting information out of those tools that you're already using. Like that's an easy way to get everything, including the last 20, even without having like a dedicated resource of engineers to do the thing. It's once you want to go all the way down and really replace it wholesale. Like I just want to make my own recruiting platform because our company wants to add that to our cycle. Like at that point, you do need like a team on the other side that's willing to maintain it. It could be a team of 2 instead of a team of 20, but you still need to allocate it because it's not for free that you're able to do these things. It's just cheaper.
Exactly. On that related topic of like non-engineers kind of building tools and so on, and so you work in dev tools. It's a big part of go-to-market for a company that does a lot of product-led growth and so on. How would you where do you think is the missing link? Like what is that one, or what are the set of primitives that are currently missing specifically for go-to-market? In terms of building agents, like are there, you mentioned like skills are a great primitive, like self-improving skills are a great primitive as well. What else do you think is like, currently as you built out some of these agents, the PSGTS pipeline agent or the social listening one, what are like some of the primitives that are still missing specifically for go-to-market agents?
Yeah, there's all sorts of little things. I do think we're still at a problem of like software being agent accessible enough to really close the gap on everything you're trying to do. Because I'm running into this right now today where I'm trying to set up a metrics dashboard across our channels. So that means I want to get our analytics across all the Twitter accounts that we're managing. I want to get the analytics for our YouTube. And I can build the second half of this of now that there's a CLI to access Google Workspace items like Google Sheets, I can actually have an agent take that data and turn it into an automated spreadsheet for me, which is great. Right. But it's pulling the data out where I just need to grab those analytics from all these services. There's no hook for an automation to grab onto. And so I still have a calendar event to grab all that manual spreadsheeting, pull it into an agent, run the skill, and get the rest of it done. So again, it's that thing I mentioned of like, if your automation isn't 100%, you have that context switch. And every time you see it on your calendar, like, got to do the data dump, got to go make sure everything's in there. So it is, to me, like making software more agent accessible so that automations are more possible. And we're getting a groundswell of it right now. In the past week, there was the ramp CLI, which is super interesting. Like, so you can build automations around like managing finances and reimbursement.
Yeah.
There's of course the Google CLI, so you can officially like manage calendar appointments and stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah, the GWS one. Yeah, it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, it's AWS, Azure. People are finding success there. The Obsidian CLI, if you want to use like note-taking or knowledge-based things, that's available. I do wish tools like Notion or Apple Notes were accessible, so I could use things that kind of have a nicer GUI on them. So that's another example of like, people use so many different SaaS silos right now where all this stuff gets stored, and some of it by necessity. Like social platforms are going to own their analytics, obviously. But we're still very early on recognizing how important automations are right now, and all the hooks that these platforms need to make so that we can start building these things so that we don't have to worry about it anymore.
I see. So in your words, there is still like a lot of low hanging fruit in terms of just like making sure software is I to use the word orchestrable, right?
Yeah.
Essentially. And like either it happens with CLI or MCP or an API, but like, you know, I think I spoke with Zach and on one of his posts and was like, what's his favorite method of integration? And I think API was like what Zach kind of really favored as well.
Yeah.
But it's do you think like to kind of, you know, look into the future a bit, which is, let's say you have all the APIs and all the integrations possible, right? I mean, in a way it's possible with OctoLens to use an earlier example. Where do you think is the next bottleneck? Is it after orchestration? Is it the context? You know, you give a very good example of the social listening one where, like, you know, you had a human in the loop review because you felt that the tool doesn't have enough context. In fact, actually, we have a LinkedIn messaging agent that we built, which can do the sort of the outreach to people. But we built a human in the loop review, and one of the reasons why we did it is because when you're talking to someone on LinkedIn, you want to make sure that, you know, you use all the context that you have, you know, and you just don't fire off something that, like, you know, just like you don't send the draft out, because the humans have that context. So there are these context gaps that happen as well. So like, where do you think, like, after orchestration, if you have the perfect APIs, perfect everything, where do you think is the next gap? Is it in the context? Is it in the feedback loop? You talked about the feedback loop. Or is it more like, you know, the human workflow design? Like, you know, just like, where do you think is the, for tools where you have had success with orchestration, where do you think is the next sort of bottleneck?
Yeah, I mean, I think you brought up like a number of the ones that I would think of, like review process, human in the loop. I don't want to say humans are the bottleneck, because that's not quite right. Because at the end of the day, it's like, I'll at least mention as a preface, like, agent responsibility is very important. Like, you can't delegate 100% of a task or a company to an agent, because who is at fault if the agent goes wrong? It can't be the agent, it's you. So you need to be involved in some step of the process. Otherwise, you don't even know what you're being accountable for, which is just a train wreck waiting to happen.
Right.
And so that's why human code review or post review or any aspect of a stack is kind of like the main bottleneck. And I feel like there's no way to completely eliminate it because of accountability, but I do think there's ways to, like, really reduce the amount of overhead there is in review, or deciding certain things where it's like, if this goes wrong, I'm just willing to accept it because it's cheap to fix. At this point, like, I've been studying less on engineering and more on just like how to be a good manager, because that's like a muscle that I didn't have to build, and now it's really important. Because I feel like one aspect of being a good manager that I've heard before is like, don't ask me about this problem if it costs $200 or less to fix it on your own.
Right.
Like there's whole classes of problems where that's probably true. And in areas where that's true, it's like, okay, worst case, I didn't have oversight and it cost me a negligible amount. So I'll just let that process keep running. It's like, yeah, deciding which tasks are in that arena where you can just not be involved in the review process at all and just let it happen however it is. Trying to make that concrete in my own process. Like, I don't know what aspects of responding to community members are like, I would just let the agent respond to this community member. There's some part of me that's like, I don't know where to draw a line. I do wonder if there's certain classes, there's probably certain classes of questions, and I'm thinking of this in real time, where like maybe it's more of a support question and has full context on everything in the code base and could just answer that question effectively. We've seen that before on forums before. And I think now we can build much more effective agents in that arena where you really could set it on full autopilot and it wouldn't be a mess. People would be fine with it. Yeah. I do think there's more expensive problems of like this major feature launch that could decide the trajectory of the company that you must be involved in. And I think there's ways to at least reduce the bottleneck size there. Like we're actually working on a process internally for engineering where every major feature that lands has an accompanying product and tech.md for that feature. Yeah. So it's like a product MD that's like describing the user flow, the use cases, the UX, and then a tech MD that's like, here's all of the data structures and how you might change the system design. So what I was mentioning earlier about like, there's UX design and then there's system design, like both of those design things encoded in like a document. So then the code review is much faster. We're very early on that journey. We're not sure if it'll really speed up the code review because how much of it can you skim if you have a markdown file? Like, is it really going to save time in the long run? But it feels directionally right to say, like, we can't just manually review code anymore. We need higher level artifacts that speed up the review process. So I'm not a bottleneck forcing a feature to sit for a week, even though there's clear customer demand and a lot of value in shipping it sooner. Like I should have some overview document where I trust the agent on the end implementation, but I can sink my teeth into the problem being solved and the system design around it where my taste is valuable. So then the other stuff is gone. So that's what we're walking towards. It's just, it's very early to see if like the state of the art models now are caught up enough that we can like start addressing that right now. But I think you kind of alluded to like, this is the next bottleneck that we're approaching, but maybe haven't quite hit yet. Maybe models need to get even better at coding, or we need to get better at feeding context into these things before that's really like the friction point.
Yeah. Cool. We have a few minutes remaining. I'll end up with like some, with some rapid fire questions. Just give me a second. All right. Sorry. There's like stuff going on in the background, but yeah. So my first one is, imagine you are a team that like is thinking about like how to build out agents in the go-to-market space. A team like similar to Warp. Let's say a growth team. Based on your experience, what are the top 3 go-to-market workflows or agents you would build, which would give them like the highest ROI? Based on your experience at Warp.
I do think like something that monitors a community fire hose. I think it's really useful to have one of those. I do think something that can generate metric dashboards for you is really useful. Our go-to-market team is really working on this.
That's a dashboard for like revenue, like a specific dashboards, or?
Yeah, let me find a specific one because the answer could be all of the above, honestly.
Okay.
But I do think like at least like community metrics, even if I have to put in a data dump, just having an agent that can whip it into a spreadsheet or something that I can manipulate. Early skill, it's been very useful. A third one. What else have we talked about so far?
I think the other one that I thought was pretty impressive was the PQL one, right? Like where you
Yes. Yeah. That's the one. The like having a skill that can talk to BigQuery to just pull out customer analytics, I guess is a good third one.
for the sales team.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. What's the biggest gotcha when teams try to operationalize agents beyond engineering? Like what's the one thing that trips up everyone?
I feel like it's trying to automate too much at once or giving too vague of an ask. I've definitely run into this, like when we were trying to make something that could craft replies and just asking it to generate a reply without providing examples or style guides or anything else. It was just crazy how night and day of a difference it was between how many replies we accepted when we just added some examples in the style guide. And then when we added self-learning, it was another 2x. So it really is like, know your style and code it into a document and then run the agent again. So if you didn't find success before, try doing that.
I see. And now I guess given your answer, I probably know the answer to the next one. Better context or better evals? What's more urgent?
I haven't written an eval in I don't know how long. Better context. Evals are important, especially if you're building a coding harness, which our quality team is certainly on top of.
Right.
But for the class of work that myself and a lot of engineers do, like the evals are kind of the backside once you've figured out the agent itself. It's like it comes later.
Right. All right. Awesome. That's all I had for today. I really appreciate you taking the time and going over as well. Anything that you would like to kind of ask or discuss?
Oh shoot. I don't know. I guess I can at least leave some plugs for people if they want to try out.
Plug in Oz. I think that's kind of a lot of what we discussed touches on how to orchestrate better and so on. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to set up any of the automations I was mentioning, all the workflows that we built have been using Oz, which is like a platform for standing up these agents in the cloud. Yeah. And you might be thinking, we talked about the Warp terminal at the start. What's this thing? Yeah. It's kind of like this next level of, you were working with agents in your terminal before, and Warp's really good for that. But if you need to scale these things outside of your terminal, you need a system for that too. Right. So we built it to be useful for our team. And then we decided this is kind of its own thing. So we're going to give it its own name. We're going to allow you to use it in the Warp terminal or with the web UI or the CLI or wherever else you want to use it. Yeah. And it has built-in like scheduling, skills, triggers from Slack, Linear, wherever else. Yeah. So if you're trying to build some of these and you want just a lightweight sandboxing tool to run an agent from anywhere, that's what this is set up to do. So if that sounds interesting, oz.dev is where that's set up right now.
Right, oz.dev. I'm surprised that you got that domain somehow. It's a 2-letter domain.
I'm shocked too. It was just available. Yeah.
It's such a great name. Oz is like the agent behind the curtain, behind the cloud, or in the cloud in this case. It's pretty cool. And yeah, I mean, I think there is really like an opportunity. Like a lot of our customers are building agents. They use the data from Syft because we have a lot of intent data from websites and LinkedIn and so on. And we have an MCP coming pretty soon. I think a lot of people start building their agents or like orchestrating a thing or two in Claude or whatever it is, right? And sometimes it's ChatGPT or whatever with MCP. But then the real thing is then like, how do you run those things scalably someplace? And I think that's where like something like Oz can be incredibly useful. So yeah, people watching and listening, try it out. And thanks again for your time, Ben, today. Great sharing notes.
Sweet. Yeah, it was great talking to you. This was great.
All right. See ya.
See ya.
Bye.